everybody, it's Caroline Coram from the Boom Review, and this is the weekly update. I'm a little late, of course, because we have been inundated by sulphur dioxide in the UK and over Europe for the best part of 24 to 36 hours. And what we see in front of us is the culprit. This is the fissure in Iceland near Grundvik on the west coast of the island. The fissure has been erupting for about 4 days. It was picked up by Volcaholic on X, and it's continuing to blast at quite some ferocity. So the fissure is here, and there is a wall built around this power station here. You can see they're hoping the magma is going to go that way and avoid Grundvik here. If the fissure extends any further south towards Grundvik, then they could be in trouble. So this was about 1 in the morning, and going forward you can see it looping round up to the north of Scandinavia and starting to stretch out over the west coast of Europe. And you can see this is where the fissure is, lighting up there on a new layer, which I'll talk about in a second. And by about 2 o'clock it had actually come off the UK, and there was a little bit left over Scotland, and it moves over to completely cover parts of France, a bit of Spain, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, parts of Scandinavia as well. We can see it spreading out across Europe at the same angle that we normally see these big lightning storms we've had for the last few weeks, and we're hoping that that isn't going to make people feel a lot worse than they have been already on the continent. But looking over the lightning picture for the coming week, it doesn't look as bad as it has been. As always, these things can change, and we will be keeping a very close eye on the lightning picture in the Atlantic, particularly because that tends to come onto the UK from the southwest. What's even more interesting here is that we have a very strong band of lightning going across Africa, and that doesn't usually happen. And we'll see a little bit later the huge number of heat spots there over that continent, also in South America, Mexico, and other parts of the world. As a quick side note, the combination of sulphur dioxide and arsenic can cause problems with the kidneys, not only the kidneys, but the respiratory tract, the cardiovascular system, the gut, and various other systems. So please seek advice from your doctor if you're feeling unwell. This next story is quite fascinating. The owner of Telegram, Pavel Durov, has been arrested getting off his plane coming from Baku into Paris yesterday. He said he made a bit of a mistake by landing in Paris while the case with the French authorities was going on about whether or not he was allowing illegal activity on his platform. So he said it was a bit of a misjudgment. However, the Russians seem to have flown into a bit of a panic. So was it a calculated step? Was it something that had already been planned by Durov and the authorities in France? And are the Russians definitely going to be in a little bit of trouble? Or did Durov make a legitimate mistake? It seems a little unlikely to me. What is even more intriguing is that Durov originally left Russia because he would not cooperate with the Russian authorities. So he is seemingly a little bit piggy in the middle at the moment, unless, of course, he's working with us. Just jumping back again to talk about these heat spots on windy.com, which is a new addition to the layers that they have. This is the active fire button on the right hand side here, and you can see that it lights up most of South America and Africa. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So I'm just going to zoom in on Africa quickly. Be careful, because these little boxes showing you what's on the ground pop up as soon as you touch them. So if you want to use this for recording, you have to kind of navigate around them a little bit. But you can see how dense the heat spots underground are in Africa. Most of these are underground. Very, very few are above ground fires. This week we've been hearing a lot about Gabon and Mpox. And obviously the heat spots are expanding into that area, so it is likely connected to the battle underground. There's also been quite a bit of chatter about Uganda, and that also has heat spots expanding into it at the moment. Another country we're very interested in is Rwanda, because up until now it seems to have been hermetically sealed against all these heat spots, but now you can see that incursions are being made into and underneath Rwanda. Madagascar is particularly interesting because during the war the Germans were going to intern the Jews there and instead backed out and decided to send them to camps instead and around the world. So what is going on underneath Madagascar? It has been alight for well over 4 years. What's underneath there? Just a quick snapshot of what is going on in Australia. We have got reports of people being unwell and struggling there, particularly on this east coast section near all of the cities. We usually find that gassing goes together with a phase of incursions underground. The battle being between those who want to try and get into and underneath Australia and the Australians and allies trying to keep them out. South America seems to also have a significant amount of warfare going on underneath it, Brazil particularly. But also, if you notice, there seems to be voids of heat spots where there is a lot of lightning. We're not entirely sure why that is. Certainly where we see heat spots, there has usually been quite significant gassing. That means clear skies, and that is usually followed by lightning or storms of some description. We can see here in America that the heat spots are very subdued. They're usually quite busy, but there has been a lot of lightning for months over the US, and there is very little opportunity for gases to get out there and cover a large area. It hasn't happened for some time. A little bit more on the west coast, but certainly not much going on in the centre and the east of the US, and hopefully people are benefiting from that to some degree. It has been uncharacteristically busy in Europe. This is Ukraine here, but it is also moving over into the Balkan states, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, and other northern states. Poland as well, you can see there, North Africa, and again, we've still got quite a lot of activity in the Middle East there. Sicily has been in the news this week for other reasons we'll get to in a minute, but there have been a lot of heat spots underneath the island and some of them breaking out above ground. We have seen the Vigili del Fuoco planes going to and from the sea inland to put out overground fires. So I'm going to start with the lightning on the evening of the 18th. It's starting to build over the Adriatic and in between Italy, Sicily and Sardinia. And you can see just here on the left-hand side, a barrel of lightning crashing into Palermo and the port of Porticello. So I'm just going to freeze that there. I'm just checking the timings. So 1:50 UTC, which would have been 3:50 Sicily time, the lightning cluster hit Porticello and the area where the boat was moored just half a nautical mile offshore. And Fabio Cefalu, which is an interesting name because that is the name of the town to the east of Porticello, saw that at 4:15 that there was lightning and that he had been due to go out but decided against it. So there was definitely lightning in the area at the time that the boat started to sink. We'll just take a look at that on close-up. Again, you've got this big gathering of lightning over Italy and it starts to spread out and rotate, and you have this barrel into Palermo, very close, right into the land there, and that will have gone right up against the coastline where the yacht was moored. Mike Lynch's yacht was moored. So I like to get some snapshots of the bigger area, and you can see a big system coming in from the north of Spain, lots of cloud, lines of cloud coming out of the northeast of Spain there, and obviously a very strong wind coming from the Marseille area in the south of France. And as the system moves in on this other pressure system in the Adriatic, you can see those clouds start to grow. So the two systems coming up against each other around the Adriatic Sea starts to concertina all that air and creates water vapour and clouds and storm clouds. And it seems to be dissipating a little bit with that pressure now going into that cloud formation. But then you start to see, as the night falls around 9 p.m. that evening, these other little plumes of cloud forming in this area around Sicily and also to the north, to the east of Sardinia, this large cloud here, and this is the one that starts to descend south. So the marker I put here is a little bit roughly placed. It should be much closer to shore, to the right of Palermo, but you've got two systems or three systems here. Two little plumes on the right hand side of that marker and one to the northwest of that marker. These very distinct plumes, and as they move in, it's as if this area is being sandwiched by two different cloud systems. And again, you see that barreling in onto the Palermo and Porticello area. And by 4 o'clock UTC or 6 o'clock local time, that storm has passed by completely as if nothing had ever happened. So let's have a look at some of the other elements of this storm, the supposed waterspout, and the practical things that may not have been done that could have saved the yacht and the people on board. This is the last known position of the yacht, and I just measured this to make sure. It was actually under a nautical mile. So they were just 0.412 nautical miles from the port of Porticello. I took a look at the depth of the water offshore here, and it goes to about 90 metres underwater before the shelf drops into the deeper part of the sea. But the yacht was found at 50 metres, so plenty of depth in order to deploy the keel fully. I mentioned earlier that the Vigili del Fuoco had been putting out fires inland, and you'll see up to the north there, pretty much at Porticello, there was a Vigili del Fuoco plane taking water out of the sea and going and extinguishing a fire just a little way inland. I also looked at the wave heights pretty close to the coast there, and they were around 40 centimetres high, really not very much at all. There was no swell really to speak of on that part of the coastline. But as had been suggested by some experts, the temperature of the water at the surface there in that area was around 27.89 degrees centigrade. And that apparently contributes to the potential for a waterspout. So as we can see in Fortune, three key theories are being considered. One was that the mast, which is the second tallest in the world, was pushed over by the wind, possibly. Then the second was that the retractable keel was in the wrong position. There is no evidence to suggest that at the moment, given the depth that the yacht was at. And the third one is that a major hatch was left open to the waves. Even though we saw that there had already been one wave of storm in the area to the east slightly, and we know that these yachts have very sophisticated radar equipment, they would not have approached this storm unprepared. They wouldn't have reopened the hatches with two storms that were so close together. And of course, we know that this yacht was fully capable of dealing with everything that could be thrown at it, even tornado type winds. So what was happening with this yacht? What made it sink? If we take a look at the Daily Mail's picture of the yacht here, this is the area that they thought might have been opened, which is a sort of platform that opens out when people want to go and have a dip in the sea. So this is some of the footage that was taken from one of the other boats, and it shows that the mast is pretty solid and that the hull is flat along the sea line. You can hardly see any waves there, so that backs up the idea that there is hardly any swell at all, just lots of water, and slowly it seems to disappear. You can still see a tiny glimpse of the hull and a light on the deck, and both seem to disappear at the same time. According to a presentation on tornadic waterspouts, the rotation already exists within the storm and the funnel forms from the cloud to the sea and form just like a tornado over ground. So the system that we saw barreling towards Palermo potentially created the ideal conditions to form a waterspout. But I wouldn't necessarily pin my hat on it destroying the mast or the keel, or even inundating a yacht that had already been exposed to another storm that had passed by just before. But what the theorists aren't talking about is this extensive lightning in the area we can see here, and this very strong and apparently rotating storm that barrels into Palermo at the time that the yacht sank out of view. With a very experienced crew, a yacht that is built to withstand tornadoes, and having just been through a section of storm before, the speed at which the yacht sank could well be explained by something like a lightning strike. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts. Thanks for listening, and until next time.